Bienvenidos a Carbon Talks. Yo soy Alfonso y somos GRUNER. El día de hoy tenemos como invitado desde Hamburg, Alemania, a Noël Coenraad, quien es analista de sostenibilidad de la empresa de energía Vattenfall. Bienvenido, Noël.
Thanks, Alfonso.
Well, thank you again for your time and for joining us. So you're a sustainability analyst at Vattenfall. What can you tell us about Vattenfall? I know Vattenfall was in COP26. What's going on right now with this?
Yeah, no, that's probably a very valid question. What is Vattenfall? I mean, very simply put, we're a vertically integrated energy utility. So that means we do everything from generating the power to transmitting it, to selling it on the market, and even acting as market makers and sellers. So that means we have a really wide portfolio from nuclear power plants, solar, wind, still gas and coal, but those are phasing out, of course, which is probably the main reason why I'm happy to talk to you today. We've really taken kind of this completely flipped view of what it means to be an energy company nowadays, and that's why we've been very active. For those of you that don't know, Vattenfall is a Swedish state-owned company, and we operate in Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and obviously Sweden and some other parts of Scandinavia like Denmark, Norway, and Finland. So we have this special area that we operate in where the Swedish state pushes us to be better than what the market is when it comes to sustainability and consumer rights. And Vattenfall has really taken that to heart and made fossil freedom something that we are striving for. So we were at COP because we joined the First Mover Coalition, so that we buying low carbon products and all these kind of things, as well as because our support for the 1.5 degree science-based targets that we have set last month officially. So yeah, a lot of stuff moving.
All right. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting to see a very large multinational energy company such as Vattenfall leading the way, especially in Europe, but also, of course, all around the world. Since its conception, it was an energy company, and of course, their portfolio was, as you mentioned, including lignite, carbon, gas, nuclear, and a little bit of everything. Now, divesting from fossils and trying to get only in renewables. What challenges has the company faced by making these bold decisions? Of course, I understand, as you mentioned, that there's pressure from governments, and particularly Scandinavian governments, who are also always the leaders and they're the top players. So what challenges has the company faced, and what opportunities has it found on the way?
Well, so the one thing that we really have realized is that sustainability isn't just an afterthought or something that you can tack on to score some extra points. We found that that's an actual valuable business strategy. So we like to say sustainability is the business. So while I am part of the strategy department of Vattenfall, and I'm purely dedicated to sustainability topics, sustainability is part of every single business decision that we're making. So it's being considered, it's being talked about. It's not this extra thing that we're trying to tack on. And the reason why we've seen this value is that although it has this high initial investment, right? Wind parks aren't easy to wind farms aren't cheap. Solar farms aren't cheap. Lots of times they required subsidies. We've now started to see that, once we're building up this expertise, that we actually don't need the subsidies anymore. We're starting to be able to actually make really good returns off of just doing the right thing. And so I think that's where um, it's taken a little bit of a learning curve, but we're really starting to see the opportunities there. The challenges, of course, is yeah, you really want to invest and grow in that renewable space, but you still have this dirty portfolio, as we call it. So we, obviously in 2017 we divested our lignite um, uh, coal-fired power plant, and that was the last really dirty part of the portfolio. And now we're actually slowly phasing out our coal assets that we have remaining. We've actually closed two already in 2019 and last year. So it's really rapidly taking place. But of course, the big challenge is that these investment decisions were made a couple of years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and the business plan said that it was going to be open for 25 to 30 years. So how do you recoup those losses in a way that you don't catastrophically hurt your balance sheet? So this has kind of been a game of where do we take the punches, and when are we strong enough to take these massive drawdowns on our balance sheet. And it's been very interesting to see how the leadership at Vattenfall has decided when do we take these big write-offs, and kind of because we have realized that divesting isn't enough, right? That was a good first step, but actually closing the plants and just making them non-existent and taking them offline is the more responsible thing to do. So in Vattenfall, we always try to really get rid of the emissions instead of just getting it off our conscience. I think that's an important one.
Or shipping them elsewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So the company has come with this plan that they call it fossil-free living in one generation. And that's, as you mentioned, the guiding principle of every business unit, business area. How, I mean, in the understanding that Vattenfall is not only an energy generator, but also an asset owner. It's involved in distribution, in district heating in Amsterdam, Hamburg, but also other new areas such as distributed generation with solar panels, storage. Can you share a little bit about this fossil-free living and what's the vision of the company?
Yeah, exactly. Fossil-free living, it's a nice vision, right? It's like this idea that, we can power society off of removed off of the dependency on fossil fuels. So that's kind of the overarching goal. But we find that actually a key point to reaching that goal is electrification. So electrification is kind of the enabler, as we call it. So, where if albeit how heating. So yes, we have district heating, but however, we are also looking into e-boilers. So where we're using electricity to heat the homes of the cities that we support and serve. If it's solar, e-mobility is a big part of our business. So we are looking a lot at can we ensure that the uh, infrastructure, the charging infrastructure can support this massive boom in EVs, so electric vehicles. Um, this all of this electrification is necessary in order to actually get to the fossil freedom. So that's kind of when you're wondering, okay, well, what is Vattenfall doing? Working with a steel manufacturer, for example, to create fossil-free steel. Well, basically, we believe that by decarbonizing these industrial processes and also daily processes like charging your car or your heating your home, it should be able to do that without fossils to help you get that power. So this is kind of electrification has been a huge role in that.
Yeah, and to my understanding as well, Vattenfall's goals in this vision, it's not only about the company itself, but also about its customers and its suppliers. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the goal to being fossil-free by 2040 includes all its suppliers and customers. And the solutions you mentioned, the solutions you mentioned, for example, electrification and distributed generation and heat pumps to replace district heating with fossil. is what's going on the customer side to enabling that fossil-free living on a daily basis. But on the supplier side, it's also it's complicated. You know, scope 3 emissions. It's complicated, but it's amazing to see companies like Vattenfall saying this is what we're going to do and making a plan towards achieving it.
Yeah, and I mean the supplier part, I think this is also where a lot more my role comes in a little bit more, as you know, our sustainability team kind of focuses on two different work streams, if you will. So we have the kind of sustainable supply chains section, which is what you're talking about, and we also have the kind of reporting and business initiatives and making sure that you know the business runs as sustainably as possible. And just the very fact that we have a whole you know focus within the sustainability team on sustainable supply chains just goes to show how difficult it really is, because you know we might act like we're this big company, 14 million customers, 20,000 employees, we did almost 2 billion euros in profit last year. But when you then start talking to some of your, let's say, peers, they're 10x your size, like a Shell or or all these kind of companies. And when you then go to a, I don't know, um, manufacturer or supplier and say, hey, we'd like you to be responsible and pay a fair living wage, and start the more proactive discussions, because obviously we can't ensure that for all our suppliers. So we're very carefully testing the waters of how far can we push it. Can we already ask everyone to disclose their carbon footprint? Not every supplier in our supply chain knows how much they emit. That, I mean, that's very reasonable, I would say, but we got to start somewhere. And we feel that our code of conduct for suppliers is a really good tool so far, that to really kind of clearly manage expectations of, like, okay, if you're working with us, we'd like to do this. And sometimes we're a little bit we act a little bit bigger than we really are, but that's where the change comes from, I think.
Right, absolutely. Actually, in our last conversations, in our past episodes, we were speaking about this trend that we're seeing, that large players from all sectors are starting to do this green procurement strategies and policies that, yeah, either you comply and, I don't know, decarbon, or start just by simply measuring your carbon footprint and having it certified, or committing to decarbonizing, I don't know, 5% of your electricity supply
We're not asking for a lot. I mean, at this point, we're just trying to map what's out there, right? We just want to know. I mean, we're not going to penalize. I mean, that's also what I really like about, the Vattenfall approach to things, is like, we're more than happy to lend a hand, and we're not going to oust you for being a terrible blah blah blah. We're not going to. We're here to help, and we believe that in order to really affect change, you need to kind of incentivize everyone to kind of come along with you. We prefer the carrot against the stick, let's say. Yeah.
So, what other projects can you tell us about around this energy transition? Like the I saw this initiative about sustainable aviation fuel in partnership with other companies, and also the InCharge charging station all along Northern Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the aviation fuel, because that's one that I'm really kind of happy with. I mean, I think also, if you going back to what you said about COP26, I think I'm seeing this real focus within the kind of energy corporation space, which is that you know we're all kind of noticing that nobody has the in-house capacity to do everything, right?
Exactly.
So even though we have this large portfolio and a lot of employees, there are still things that we know nothing about at Vattenfall, and that for example, a Shell or an SAS might know a lot more about. And at COP26, I really noticed that collaboration and partnerships is in the air. A lot of very exciting stuff being started. First Mover Coalition, the move for net zero shipping. These ones are really close to our heart. Electrification of fleets. So this ties into our InCharge business or e-mobility business. So these are all kind of, I think, if you want to look at these macro trends in energy corporations, they're starting to work together and complementing each other with their strengths. And that's actually brings it nicely to this aviation fuel project, which we're doing together with SAS, so the Scandinavian airline, Shell, and I'm forgetting the third partner, the chemical producer that actually makes the fuel. And the idea is that it's a synthetic fuel that actually reduces your carbon footprint when flying. So I think that's something that I know I'm really looking forward to, and we're super excited. And I think our role in the project is to provide our renewable energy and for their processes as well as hydrogen. I think that's involved, but I'll have to look a little bit deeper into it. We're very new; it's very new at the moment.
Yeah, but what I find very interesting is the fact that, okay, your core business is an energy company in and of itself, but on the side, Vattenfall is also going into these constraints, conundrums where it's very difficult to either electrify or decarbonize, such as aviation, of course. It's been in the conversation that it's pretty impossible to electrify an airplane due to the weight of the batteries and stuff. So the way to go is to do carbon-free liquid fuels, such as hydrogen, for instance. And I think that's pretty interesting that you're getting into that part. So
yeah, and I mean, if I may, there's another example it's a good one is, but obviously it's been in the news a little bit, which is the hybrid projects, which is where we're working together with the Swedish steel manufacturers and miners, and we're supplying both renewable energy as well as green hydrogen to their production process to make fossil-free steel. And like you said, these are usually tough nuts to crack because they're so carbon intensive industries. However, when you do crack them, the benefits are huge. I mean, the steel industry accounts for a significant amount of emissions in the world, and so being able to look at where do we make the most impact and where can our electrons make the most impact. I think that's kind of been the driving force behind it subliminally.
perfect. So, Noel, can you tell us a little bit more about your role as sustainability analyst in the context of an energy company? Although I have to say, it's one of the leading energy companies that's already quite ahead from the rest, from the big ones, as you mentioned. We've heard from really large players such as Shell and Total that they're changing their business models from oil and gas companies to energy companies because they've understood, they've done their scenario planning, and they know that either they catch the train towards decarbonization and electrification, or they'll die, as we've seen in other cases such as the Blockbuster and Netflix case, just to mention an analogy. How is it for a sustainability analyst at a leading energy company in Europe working in this particular area of sustainability that right now you mentioned touches every single aspect of the company?
Yeah, I mean, so my role. I'm very fortunate in my role that I like you said, I get to work over all the different units. I get to drive sustainability initiatives, think about what's 2030 looks like, what 2040 looks like in the energy landscape in Europe. And yeah, I mean, the BPs, Shell, Total, all of them turning around and saying, we're in on this. We want to, you know, uh, be future proof. Makes a lot of sense. And I mean, it was only a matter of time, let's say. And it's something that I actually really welcome, and I think most people at Vattenfall would welcome that as well. That we're not trying to keep the competition out in this case because there's so much to do There's we're really just scratching the surface, and that's another thing I really wanted to stress today was, you know, we started off when we thought about, what does it mean to be a sustainable energy company, you know, have a couple large scale solar farms, have a couple large scale wind farms, put them in sea, put them on land, and you're done. Call it a day, right? Keep expanding the portfolio. But it just turns out it's not that simple, right? You start having these very difficult, uh, times with the flexibility of the market. You need to manage the loads completely differently. All these kind of challenges are popping up, and then you start to realize, well, maybe, you know, B2C solar sales isn't for us, right? Like, yeah, that was something that in our, the first 5 years of fossil free within one generation, that was kind of the way to get customers involved, was to install solar panels on their roofs. But, there's so many companies like Gruner that are, really much more efficient at this than a big, you know, heavy corporation like Vattenfall. So what can we do that's different? And then what you see is it's getting more sophisticated, right? So we're looking at, okay, maybe our niche needs to be a little bit more controlled. So look, what are we looking at? Instead of let's do everything sustainable, let's do just the couple things that we're really good at. So what are we really good at? We're really good at offshore wind. We've really figured out how to optimize these parks. We have a lot of internal knowledge. We know, we have good relationships with suppliers, and that's somewhere where we know, like, hey, we're pretty good at this. Same thing with just so large scale solar farms. This is, when you're getting up to 50 megawatts, these are big parks. Um, that seems to be a little bit more our cup of tea. And then let's see if we can get customers involved in a different way by selling them maybe green gas, so hydrogen. But all these things take a lot of time and a lot of investment, and I think that's basically that sophistication and paying that upfront cost basically to enter and kind of break through the market. I think that's where we're well placed. The more saturated markets like home solar, yeah, the heating business. Yes, district heating is completely new, but you know, putting in smart meters and stuff, that's not really for us anymore. Like, we've done that part. Well, let's see what we can really move into.
Of course, yeah. It makes sense to focus on the core, on where we're good at, and leave the rest for other players. There's always room for everyone, So yeah, just wrapping up this conversation. The trend is there. I mean, we've seen now in COP26, even though it was short in what the public would have wanted to hear from governments particularly and companies. But I mean, we see that there is a demand for change, for this transition, and that now everything is happening. It's becoming a reality, and bold statements from large companies such as Vattenfall, who are taking the lead and saying, this is what we're doing and there's no other way, and here's our plan, and if you want to join us, come to us, and we'll go together in this way.
Yeah, I mean, and this demand that you're talking about, it's so true. I mean, the thing is, nowadays, the problem isn't necessarily convincing people to buy, green electricity, which is what, when I first started at Vattenfall, I remember we really had to sell to people the idea of, like, yeah, we have a superior product because it's, green or it's renewable. And customers were still not getting that. And now we're getting the point where they're asking us for stuff that they've heard about on the news, like hydrogen or green gas, and then we're saying, like, yeah, I mean, that's just that, that's still 10 years away. We're not going to be able to spread, and then they're mad at us for not being at that level yet. So I mean, that's the kind of thing. And I mean, there's a lot of bold statements out there. We are pretty bold. I mean, I think we're one of the only energy companies that has this 1.5 degree target. I know there's a couple dozen of them that have also joined, but it's pretty aggressive. We're cutting 43% of our emissions relative to 2017 by 2025, and then 77% by 2030, and then all the way down to net zero in 2040. And that's crazy considering that we had, or we were at this level where it was 20 million tons of CO2 in a year. And how are we going to just ramp down to a point where it's, neutralizable, let's say, because you can't neutralize 20 million tons basically.
And with this in mind, will there be a point in this route towards 2040 in which there might be a scenario that Vattenfall will need to do some carbon offsets, do some compensations? Is that something you're looking into, or is it absolutely cutting everything?
I mean, the thing is, and this is something that will come later, and I think that it's interesting from my perspective as, a sustainability analyst that's been kind of reviewing these different carbon trajectories. A lot of companies are selling it as if, we'll be zero, but it's net zero, right? It's a very important message, because no matter how hard you try, that last 10%, that last 1% is going to be so difficult to get rid of. And it's just, it's like that belly fat when you're working out. It's just that last bit to get that off. I mean, it's going to take you, years to get that last part. And the same goes with net zero targets. I think we just need to be realistic that at some point, we need to provide our customers security and the intermittency of renewables. Sometimes, we can't take those risks. I mean, the fees and the fines are way too high. So we just really can't have that the base load falls below a certain point or within our security boundaries. So there's always going to be emergency backup CHPs, gas fired, or whatever they're fired by. They'll have some form of fossil to them, but hopefully the, a negative carbon emissions market will mature by then, and we'll have, good ways to neutralize our emissions, and we can achieve fossil freedom that way.
Exactly. Well, Noël, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation, and we really appreciate having you and taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It's really great.
It's our pleasure. Los invitamos a suscribirse para conocer cómo crear un futuro sostenible. Podrán encontrarnos como GRUNER MX en Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter y Facebook. Los invitamos.